Welcome back, and in this class, I'm going to tell you about production for self consumption and production for exchange. Now, who does production for self consumption? It is generally the household sector, and also you'll be surprised to know it'll be interesting for you to know it's a general government. They also, but the only difference is that the general government is collective consumption. It's known as collective consumption, and in this, it is known as subsistence production. That is for collective. Okay, so and then of course production for exchange. That's what we do. A little time we're going to spend on this, not much. So pay attention. So of the three producing sectors of the domestic economy, the household sector consists of some enterprises which produce commodities for their own consumption, and this is known as production for self-consumption. If the producers themselves consume the entire output they produce, then it is known as production for self-consumption. Now in India, more than half of the farmers produce food grains for self-consumption. The dependence of such producing units on other enterprises, either technically or economically, is negligible as far as the commodity meant for self-consumption is concerned. So this is also known as subsistence production units, since their production is just enough to meet the consumption needs, to meet their consumption needs. As a result, they fail to generate surplus, which is a source of capital formation. So then what can you infer? In case an economy consists of subsistence production units or it is dominated by them, it is called a subsistence economy. So in such economies, capital formation poses a serious problem. So let's talk about the government. As regards the government sector, we've already seen the government does not sell but furnishes goods, and the general government we are talking about. It furnishes goods and services either free or at a nominal price. Since no sale is involved, it is argued that government production is for self-consumption. So who are the consumers of a country's defense, law, order? Can you isolate a particular individual or a particular place and say that they are using these services? So it is argued that no, isn't it? So that is why it is argued that the government is both the producer and the consumer of these services. Defense, law and order, because government of the people, by the people, for the people. So taking that forward, so it is argued that the government is both the producer and the consumer of these services. Defense, law and order, health services, parks, street lighting, roads and bridges, they are all collective wants, and the government produces goods and services to satisfy the collective wants. The satisfaction of these wants is sometimes called public consumption or collective consumption. Now, the expenditure of the government for the production of goods and services for collective consumption is called public consumption expenditure. It is also called government consumption expenditure. And since no sale is involved for the goods and services produced by the government, there arises the problem of finding the value of output of the government. So what is that? Government employees, people to work in various capacities, government employs people to work in various capacities as soldiers, sailors, civil servants, judges, policemen, doctors, engineers, etc. and also purchase goods and services from the market such as paper, pens, pencils, typewriters, furniture, trucks, cars, electricity, fans, air conditioners, etc. Government employees use these goods and produce goods and services for the community. So only two types of costs are involved in the process, that is value of goods and services purchased and wages and salaries paid to the employees. So, and when you talk about other costs such as rent, interest and profit in the general government production, well, it is not there. Therefore, the value of output of government is equal to the cost of producing it, and the value of goods and services produced is thus evaluated at cost. So, operating surplus, that is rent, interest and profit, the question of this does not arise in the government sector, since other factor incomes like rent, interest and profits are assumed to be nil. In other words, again, capital formation does not take place in the general government sector because that needs operating surplus on the basis of operating surplus. Hence, general government production is for self-consumption. We can prove that. So talking about that, now let's come to production for exchange. So we did production for self-consumption, that is by consumer households, the unincorporated enterprises, and we also talked about the general government sector. Now, production for exchange, who does this? Enterprises in the corporate and the quasi-corporate sector and household sector too produce goods and services for exchange. They sell their commodities in the market at a price which covers their cost of production. And their production is not meant for self-consumption. Okay, there'll be some enterprises who will consume their own products, but that is very negligible part of their production. Just let's take a small farmer may sell a small part of his production in the market, or a huge coal mine or electricity generating units consume a small part of their production in the production process. But most of the enterprises sell their entire output and it is used by others. In other words, there is absolute no element of self-consumption most of the time. For example, enterprises which produce sugar, machinery or textile machinery sell their entire output. So enterprises sell their goods and services at a price which covers their cost of production. As we've already seen, costs includes profits as well. Enterprises pay wages and salaries to their employees and also pay for the raw materials and other secondary inputs purchased from other enterprises from the sale proceeds of their outputs. In case land, buildings and capital belong to the enterprises, rent and interest also belong to them. The factor incomes of rent, interest and profit can be called operating surplus. So in production for exchange, operating surplus is a source of capital formation and it happens here. So in other words, production for exchange is the basis of capital formation in the modern capitalist economies. So this was basically we talked about production for self-consumption and production for exchange. So we'll get back with another class.